Today I would be giving you some information on requirement gathering or elicitation techniques. So there are various techniques that are involved in these processes, but I would not be explaining all the techniques in this video. I will be focusing on one technique. So if you don't know what is requirement gathering or elicitation, I have taken another video explaining about requirement gathering and elicitation, so you can take a look at it. The link is given in the description box. So now let us take a look at the different gathering and elicitation techniques. So let's get into it. So requirement gathering and elicitation techniques, there are questionnaires or surveys. You have interviews, which we will be looking in this particular video. Then you have user observations or shadowing, document analysis, brainstorming, workshops, role plays, prototyping, interface analysis, and use cases and scenarios. So let's look at what are interviews. So this is a very common technique that is used for requirement gathering or elicitation, and this is mainly used to gain an understanding about the customer's business, their pain points, what's their process looks like, who are all involved in the business, which are the personas, and other details which you try to derive out of the interview. So the main goal of this is to try to understand the customer, what are their pain points, and try to get the requirements out directly from the customer. So this is about interviews. And the types of interviews, there are three types of interviews. The first one is structured. Okay, structured is something where you prepare for the interview by listing down your questions which you are going to ask during the interview. So it's like you're pre-preparing all these questions that you want to ask during the interview, and the interview goes as per the questions being prepared. So that is called as structured. And this is usually done, this type of interview is usually done in follow-up interviews, because after the first interview, which is like an onboarding interview, you would have different questions. Okay, so and maybe you would have found out certain requirements were not clear, or you wanted more information from the customer or the clients. So at that time you would jot down all your questions, and you would start proposing it in the next interview to the client and the customer, and getting answers from it. So that is the structured type of interview. The other type of interview is unstructured. So usually this is in onboarding, focus group meetings, and in interviews. So it's followed in these type of meetings and interviews. Unstructured is something where you have totally no questions that you prepare. You start talking to the client or the customer, and based on what answer they give you, you start you're pushing out the next question. So if they tell you some scenario and you have some questions relating to that scenario, from that particular answer given by the client, you would ask them the next set of questions. So this is unstructured, where you don't plan out any questions, but it just you ask questions in the just in a flow as the interview goes. The third type is semi-structured, where you have a set of questions, and once you're asking those questions and the clients keep answering to those questions, you would derive other questions from those answers and try to get out insights and requirements from those answers given by the client. So these are the three types of interviews that exist, and you can use any type depending on what is your scenario and the situation. So this is about interviews. Now, here are some tips when you are going for an interview or during an interview. There are some tips and things that you can keep in mind. So the first one is use the funnel approach for interviews. So funnel approach. So imagine how a funnel is. A funnel starts off broadly and then it narrows down. So always when you're, especially during the first time when you're interacting with the client during onboarding sessions, when you're interacting with the client, you should never go into the specifics just at the beginning. So try to get a broader understanding of the client's background, about their their business, about how generally their business runs. Understand the bigger picture first, and then you narrow down. So that is the funnel approach. The next one is be prepared for an interview. Go through documents, background research, and list out your questions. So when you're scheduling an interview with the client or the customer, Don't go unprepared. Always go prepared. If any documents were given to you before the interview, go through the documents. Suppose something is unclear to you, you don't know any information regarding the business or the client, do a background research and also list out your questions. Okay, list out your questions beforehand so you don't go unprepared for the interview and you don't know what you have to ask the customer or the client. The next one is ask questions, but do not ask many questions and overwhelm the customers. So they keep telling you, so interviews, you might think, keep on asking questions to the customers or clients. But you can ask questions, but do not ask too many questions and overwhelm the customers. So you can ask why things are this way. If they give you an answer, but why is it like this? Don't keep, asking too many questions to the customers or clients and overwhelm them. The next one is do not repeat already answered questions just because it's on the list. So let's say you have prepared a list of questions 1 to 10, and when asked a question to the client, so let's say the first question, and they gave you an answer which actually answered the second and third question also. So just because the second and third question is in your list, don't again repeat that second question which was already answered by the client. Don't repeat it back to them because it would annoy them and it's a waste of time also. So that's another tip. The next one is empathize with the customers. So to make interviews very interactive, and also for the interview to be of high quality, and to have a good rapport with the customer and client, always put yourself in the shoes of the customers or the clients. Okay, so whenever they have certain pain points, to make it interactive, you also try to understand their business, where are they having difficulties, and you can engage in empathizing conversations also, saying, okay, I guess this might be a very burdening process for you, this might be a little bit uh, a tedious process. So these type of empathy can also be included in the interview, but not too much. The next one is always be an active listener and do allow the client or customer to do more of the talking. So during interviews, your job is to ask questions, and the very next moment, you need to be a listener, an active listener. Let the client do more of the talking. Be an active listener and observe and take down points, and let them do more of the talking, because you need to always get requirements and information from them. So if you do more of the talking, it's just a waste of time. The next one is based on the situation, choose to ask open ended or closed ended questions. So sometimes you might, most of the time, it's encouraged to ask open ended questions, because if you ask certain leading questions, then you're only limiting the customer to a particular set of requirements. But ask open ended questions in the beginning. Okay, get different information from the customers. But if there are situations where you have to ask closed ended questions, like yes or no questions, then you can always ask the closed ended questions. So totally is depending on the situation you are in and how the conversation is going. The next one is always try to keep your interview within scope and do not deviate from what needs to be discussed. So you would have an agenda for the meeting. Sometimes having a conversation with the customers or clients and understanding different aspects of it, there might be chances where the conversation deviates from the actual agenda and what was planned for. So you as a BA, you have to always have the control over the scope of the meeting. Do not let the conversation deviate too much out of focus. So that's another tip. The next one is inform the customer and record your interviews for future references. So whenever you're having an interview with the client, if possible, you can even record if it's going to be online, or if there are other means of recording. You can inform the customer and you can record the interviews for future references, because there might be certain situations where you might forget certain points or information. So record the meeting, which would be helpful for you in future to revisit the information. The next one is take down notes. Though there is recording, taking down notes is always helpful, because you take down notes in a way that you understand. So always taking down notes is another powerful way to capture requirements during an interview. The next one is use supporting material to make your interviews more interactive and informative. Example, rough diagrams, process flows, etc. So sometimes just talking to the client and customer may not be helpful in conveying your ideas to them, or they conveying their ideas to you. So it's always when you are in an interview, and if you're able to use a whiteboard, draw some flow diagrams or some rough diagrams, so that they will be able to visually see things, and they'd be able to articulate their ideas also. So it's always good to use some supporting information also, which would make the interview more informative and also more interactive. The next one is, at the end, summarize your points for confirmation. So when you have an interview, you would definitely got a lot of information from the customer. So as a confirmation and as a affirmation, and to confirm that the information you have understood and what you have processed and what was given to you, to do that, you just summarize what was said, so that they also will be able to correct you if you had misunderstood or misinterpreted certain information. So that's the next one. And the last one is, try to understand the broad or narrow picture based on how the customers explain the problem. So sometimes if the customer is always talking in an abstract manner and in a broader sense, at one point of time, definitely you need to go down to the specifics. So try at that time, try to ask more specific questions, to go down into the specifics and drill down into the details. Some customers might always keep talking about specific information and in detail, but you definitely need to understand the broader picture also. So at that time, try to funnel up your questions to get information about the broader picture. So these are some tips and information about interviews. I hope this was informative to you. So if you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do subscribe to this channel, and also do share your feedbacks. Thank you.